Not even a guarantee that all the X and 2s make it. Yep, seen this before.
It's a Blackleaf Cliffs. It's an Inquisition of Kozilek to get things started. See Paul's hand with the Path to Exile, Eclectic Company, a Scavenging Ooze, Noble Hierarch, and a Wild Nacatl, a couple of lands there in Windswept Heath and Wooded Foothills.
Solid opening here. Normally, the discard spells are pretty potent against this style of deck when you're following it up with removal spells or your own threats, but Paul gets a little bit of staying power here with Eclectic Company, and that can't be touched by the Inquisition.
So Sung Wook will write down the contents of Paul's hand. And we'll see what he wants to select with the discard spell. Of course, you cannot select Eclectic Company, but a lot of good cards to choose from here.
Yep.
See Sung Wook's hand. It's got Tarmogoyf over there. Looks like another discard spell too.
The creatures feel interchangeable enough in this hand that I wouldn't be surprised to see him snag Path to Exile here.
Oh, Nacatl. Time for that to go. Maybe a little surprising there.
I mean, it's so predicated on what's going on in Namsong's hand that it's just speculation.
Wooded Foothills will be sacrificed. Paul going to take at least one for a Noble Hierarch. Might be 3. We'll see what land he wants to search up. He'll go with the Stomping Ground, so down to 17. Someone picked up a copy of Terminate. Another copy of Blackleaf Cliffs in here too.
But possibly without green mana, which makes the Wild Nacatl selection make a lot more sense there. If he's worried about the speed of the game, well, Nacatl's the fastest thing going on.
There's an Inquisition. Paul for the turn drew a copy of Loxodon Smiter. I would not select that one. Just gonna put that out there. Scavenging Ooze, good choice.
I think Namsong gave him the pump fake. I'll take your smite. I'll go take something else.
Not quite. Pass that turn back. Horizon Canopy the draw. It's a Windswept Heath. Down to 16 here for Rietzl.
And Paul, for those of you who don't know, there's definitely a stereotype that the top players, the Hall of Famers, they all gravitate towards control decks. That's what they like to do.
Not the case with him.
Paul's an exception to the rule. Definitely plays aggressive strategies.
That's why I've always been a big fan. He likes to beat down.
Yep. It's a way to become a hero to some.
No stinking blue cards.
No.
There's Terminate. And Sung Wook with a little bit of mana trouble, so he's got to slow down Paul's ability to cast Collected Company. In the meantime, beatdowns with the Smiter. Here's a Tarmogoyf. Horizon Canopy, going to leave the mana available to cast Path to Exile, pass the turn back. This is kind of what we talked about, where if things don't line up correctly, of course Jund has a ton of removal, but you stumble, you fumble, these creatures hit hard.
Yep. I mean, this is a consequence of Namsong just missing a color and land drops, but these creatures don't mess around. I mean, this game could be over very, very quickly. Even if Namsong strings together a couple lands in a row, he might just get templed out of the game, especially with the Collected Company waiting.
Dark Confidant to play. No land draw. Tarmogoyf for 4/5, Smiter a 4/4. They're coming into the red zone. Down to 8 for Nam. Temple Guard going to enter the battlefield untapped. Pass that turn back. Dark Confidant's going to reveal Scavenging Ooze. Down to 6 is the Jund player. A land in Blackleaf Cliffs. No green mana yet, though. Rarely do you see Jund have these kind of mana problems.
Whenever I've talked to anyone who builds Jund, when they talk about the reason if they're not playing Treetop Village, it's just a colored mana issue. They feel like the color mana situation of the deck is not good enough to warrant those kind of lands.
In response to Liliana, Paul casts the Collected Company. Take a look at the top 6 cards. Hopefully find 2 creatures. I might sacrifice one of them to Liliana. A Smiter and a Kosali Pride Mage. And no more, says Sung Wook. Paul Rietzl going to win game 1 here over Namsong Wook. Night Company very quickly up a game here over Jund.
Some stumbles there, and Paul able to capitalize.
Sideboard time, and we take a look at 3 copies of Feed the Clan, 3 Thunderbreak Regions, a Seal of Primordium and Outpost Siege, the Sowing Salt, the 3 copies of Fulminator Mage, an Ancient Grudge, an Anger of the Gods, and a Shatterstorm. I know we saw that sideboard from Nam last round, but it was against Obzon. It's got to be a little different here against Naya Company.
Well, the only card that I'm 100% on board with in the entire sideboard, the one copy of Anger of the Gods. Very solid against Paul's deck. Past that, this doesn't feel like a Feed the Clan matchup to me because Paul's playing the board. He's got a lot of creatures, and so Paul's the type of deck that can withstand someone gaining some life. And Thunderbreak Region also seems like it could be okay, but it doesn't match up all that well against a lot of Paul's threats. It's just trading with a Smiter. It's not going to be able to block Tarmogoyf, and neither the Reliquary is going to push past it as well. And I just don't know if it's really that kind of matchup. You know, Nam is on the defensive here. Thunderbreak Regions make a lot of sense in the Judd Mirror match when the game's going to go on for a very long time. You need to be fluid with the roles that you're going to be in. But here, I don't know if they really stand out.
We'll take a look at Paul's side of things as he's quickly up a game. He's got 3 Core Firewalkers, 2 Magus of the Moon, 2 Thalia Garden of Thraben, a Kataki War's Wage, 2 Grim Lavamancer, a Bonfire of the Damned, a Choked, 2 Stony Silence, and a single copy of Blood Moon. So different than what his good friend Sperling is playing.
Yeah, there's a little bit of difference here, but it's a lot of the same stuff. I can get behind... I don't know if I'm behind Blood Moon in the matchup, but I can definitely get behind Magus of the Moon here because it's still a threat card. It's something that can eat an Edict or trade with something in the event that it's bad and still has the potential to lock Namsung out of the game a percentage of the time. I think the 2 copies of Thalia are good in this matchup, just being disruptive towards Nam's curve of removal. I think the 1 copy of Bonfire of the Damned is a fine card to bring in here as well.
Well, anytime we can get a Bonfire of the Damned on camera, I'm for it.
It's been a while.
Yes.
You don't get to see a lot of it. Standard, all over the place. A lot of Bonfire moments. Modern, much less frequent.
When people ask me what my favorite Magic cards of all time are, Bonfire of the Damned is certainly within the list.
It is really exciting. I never got to I played very little competitively when that card was available. I think I played in 1 invitational, a couple standard tournaments. So I didn't play with the card ever and played against it infrequently. But it is a hoot.
Yeah, I just love it. I absolutely love it.
And this seems like
makes for great moments.
And this seems like a good matchup for Bonfire. Namsung has some creatures in his deck. Also, having a little extra burn in the deck is not bad for Paul in this matchup because if Namsung's doing his thing, he's grinding the game down. It's going to go on for a very long time. And having an out as powerful as Bonfire is a nice thing to have.
These players will shuffle up here for game number 2. If you are just joining us, Cedric Phillips, Patrick Sullivan here in the booth. We've got Ken Crocker and Nick Miller on the sideboard doing your deck techs, your quick questions, and picking your matches. And of course, the rest of the SCG Live crew. So we get ready for game number 2 here between Namsung Wook and Paul Rietzl. At SCG Live, hashtag GPCharlotte all weekend long for your questions. We love answering them. You can also send them directly to me at Cedric A. Phillips or directly to Patrick at Basic Mountain. As these players still in top 8 contention, and Paul very quickly winning game number 1 and getting ready for game number 2 with his Naya Company deck. Pretty innovative thing these guys have got going, him and Matt Sperling, and they're both in pretty good position to do well in this tournament.
Yep. Definitely outside the box here. And the deck is interesting because there are some aggressive elements and then there's some late game elements as well. Most of the zoo lists that we've seen with Wild Nakatl, they're focused on trying to win the game on turn 4 or turn 5 with a cheap curve of creatures. This deck is a little bit bigger, has a little bit more staying power, and a lot of that has to do with Collected Company. Nakatl's in the deck essentially because it's too good not to play. But it is an outlier for what this deck is trying to do. It's more in the mid-range camp with an aggressive slant towards it.
And of course, Patrick, as Sung Wook is taking a look at his opening hand, we have the, given that it's West Coast time, the Golden State Warriors fans have started tweeting at us. Wonderful.
I mean,
truly
act
wonderful.
like you've been there before.
An Inquisition of Kozilek to start things off. This is how Nam started off the last game. It didn't help him too much. And Paul's hand is, again, pretty good.
Solid hand, but, you know, last game you can't read too much into because Nam didn't do a whole lot.
Yeah, had those mana issues.
That's just what's up there. This is the type of hand from Paul. This is a solid hand, and I would never consider mulliganing this, and especially in a matchup like John where you need all your cards. But a curve of removal spells into something big can tear this kind of hand apart.
Yeah, we can see something. Paul plays Wild Nakatl. All right, bolt that. Play your next creature. All right, Liliana that. And all of a sudden, maybe the house of cards crumbles down.
Exactly. No, not to say there's a guarantee of that. Just Namsung, I think, has a strategic edge in the matchup, and even Paul's good hands are things that he has a good curve of answers to most of the time.
Wooded Foothills. It's going to bring Paul down to at least 19, but it appears to be 17. See the weapon of choice here. It'll be a stomping ground. And this is actually something I love about modding. You know, the mana works for all the decks.
Yeah.
Now it's about finding the right spells and finding the right sideboard cards to be specific decks, but you get to do your thing.
Although it's funny, Paul is one of the pros who is most outspoken about disliking the fetch lands, and I hate searching and shuffling, so I'm sure playing a zoo deck with a bunch of fetch lands and Knight of the Reliquary is not exactly his cup of tea.
Bloodstained Mire. A crack here. Down to at least 16 is Sung Wook. There's a basic Swamp. Perhaps hedging a bit against Blood Moon. Maybe he just doesn't want to take very much damage.
Yeah, he's the defensive deck in this matchup.
Yeah.
He wants to preserve his life total as much as possible.
Another Reliquary to draw here. That's a gooder. There's a Wooded Foothills. Here's an attack. And before damage, I'll be looking for the old Temple Garden. Maybe a Sacred Foundry.
Looks like he's going to 14 here,
Yeah.
so some sort of duel.
There's a Sacred Foundry. I got to charge that Wild Nikado all the way up.
Now, Paul's deck, Sperling's deck, this Night Company deck, it is light on removal. There's only 4 bolts and 4 paths, so the big threats out of Jund are problematic. It's not overloaded with a lot of cheap bolt effects, like some builds of Zoo are. Again, it's a mid-range deck, and it needs to be filled with creatures to maximize Collected Company, so there's only so much space for removal.
Might be Scavenging Goose time. Tarmogoyf an option here, too, for Paul. He'll go with the Tarmogoyf. Creature sorcery land in the graveyard right now, so that thing is at 3/4. Overgrown Tomb to draw. Sung Wook does have access to red mana, but it looks like it can only enter the battlefield tapped at this point. He's going to start by attacking. There's an Overgrown Tomb. He'll take 2. And now, another Scavenging Ooze. Pass that turn back. Hey, maybe Paul could have blocked with the Tarmogoyf there?
No, because Namsung could eat the Noble Hierarch, which also shrinks the Goyf.
Got it.
So it would be 3/3 against 2/3 in that spot.
Got it. Looked a little weird at 2/2 into a 3/4.
Yeah.
Yeah, for a minute there, it's like, well, wait, did someone get him? It's like, no.
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 And if you want to know where beatdown decks, like Night Company, Burn, where they get an edge in the format here, 60 cards to 60 cards, it looks like Namsung has a big edge. And I still think he's got the better end of the matchup. But he's taken 5 damage off of his land so far. And the red source of mana is delayed by a land that comes into play tapped with an activated power that's unlikely to matter in the game.
Mm-hmm.
And even though Paul's at a pretty big deficit in terms of power level, that's giving him a shot to stay in this game.
Paul kind of offering up the trade right now. Setting in the Wild Mikado into a Scavenging Ooze that's a 2/2 that could turn into a 3/3. If you're Sung Wook, now there are some cards that you could be concerned about because I imagine you don't know exactly what Paul's up to, but at the end of the day, if he had a card like Gorkland Rampager, he would attack with both creatures.
Yep. I think the thing here from Paul's side is he's happy to offer up the trade here because he wants more creatures to go in the graveyard for his Tarmogoyf for the time being. And because of Nam's life total and the power of Paul's hand, if Nam wants to spend a lot of time just using Scavenging Goose to exile creatures from the graveyard and not really do anything else, Paul can probably overpower that with the spells in his hand.
Sung Wook removes a Noble Hierarch, gains a life from the Scavenging Ooze, going to turn that Ooze into a 3/3. So he's starting to get to work in the graveyards, starting to make some bigger creatures. Buffer that life total as well. Wooded Foothills, not a bad draw. Ghost Quarter in hand as well. Can't figure out that Maelstrom Pulse. I can take care of the Knight of the Reliquary. Don't want to let that thing get going.
Now, Wooded Foothills is a nice draw. The issue with it is I don't believe there's a mountain in this deck. There typically isn't. The basics are in there to play around Blood Moon, a little bit of forest and 2 swamps. That's typical. And he has to choose between either getting a forest untapped, which means his red mana is still delayed if that's a factor, or he has to get a Stomping Ground tapped or untapped, and all of those situations come with some problems as well. I think that he has no red spells in hand right now currently, so he can afford to just get a forest, which is good for him.
Yeah.
This allows him to play Maelstrom Pulse and pump a news. A solid turn.
I think that's what we're about to see right now. There's a Pulse. Now the Reliquary is going to bite the dust. Curious if maybe you do activate the Ooze now, or if you wait. Here's an attack with a 3/3. Also, if you make one big Ooze, or do you kind of split the difference? Those are the decisions that Namsung Wook needs to make right now. This appears to be coming across with just one Ooze right now. That's a 3/3.
Yeah, there's only the one creature in the graveyard here, so Paul can't block with the Tarmogoyf effectively because Namsung can trigger it at a moment's notice.
This game all about Scavenging Ooze right now and its power to affect the game.
Yeah, this card is problematic for beatdown decks. The life gain matters a lot, and it's so potent when paired with the removal spells because the Ooze just keeps growing and growing. The investment on the card's low, and its ceiling is very, very high.
Here comes the Nakadal, much like last turn. Paul just kind of offering up the trade if Nam would like to take it. Will decline again. Down to 5. What's interesting here is 2 Lightning Bolts gets the job done, but I suppose Lightning Bolt's going to be good no matter what.
Yeah, at this point, you know, Namsung will probably have to activate the Scavenging Ooze at the end of the turn, and then 2 Lightning Bolts is horrible for him. He loses both the Oozes. He's got nothing going on.
He just loses
so
the game. He goes up to 6, and then he just dies to 2 bolts upstairs.
Right. What I'm saying is it's not worth playing around the bolt scenario because 2 bolts is just too hard for him to beat at this stage. And if Paul was sitting on Lightning Bolts, you probably would have seen him before this turn.
Maybe fire away
There's been really good spots for Paul to cast Lightning Bolt.
Now the Reliquary is here again. Scavenging Ooze. It's going to go active. See what it wants to remove. It's going to go, it looks like Knight of the Reliquary. Though, again, Scavenging Ooze has a lot of different things it can do right now. It's having a huge impact on the game. If it wants to shrink Tarmogoyf by removing the sorceries, it can. If it'd like to shrink Knight of the Reliquary by removing the lands in Paul's graveyard, it can. The more green mana, the better right now for Namsung Wook. See, Tarmogoyf is scaled down to a 2/3, only sorceries and lands in the graveyard.
Fulminator Mage, the draw here, which is kind of good in the sense that it's a creature that Namsung can get into the graveyard to pump a Ooze.
Yeah.
And kind of not great because it's low impact and puts another land in the graveyard for neither Reliquary.
Yeah, it's weirdly good and weirdly bad at the same time. A strange thing to say.
Yeah, it is.
That's Ghost Quarter. Got to adjust that mana a little bit to be able to cast this Fulminator Mage. Also, what's kind of unique about this situation is there even a right land to hit with Fulminator Mage? Here comes the Ooze.
Well, what's good about this setup here is this is now an attack for lethal on the board. So Paul has to put at least one block out there. The easiest one is Knight of the Reliquary in front of one of the Oozes, I believe. Although that leaves Paul in a spot where Namsung can nuke the graveyard and not even have to do anything with the Fulminator Mage.
And we're going to see just how great both these players are in this situation. This is weird creature combat.
Right. This is really bizarre. Namsung has a lot of control over this. A double block is the only way to really do anything for sure. as it forces Samsung to either, sacrifice the Fulminator Mage to get a creature in the graveyard to pump the ooze, at which point there's another land in Paul's graveyard and a mana's gone, so neither Reliquary stays a certain size. But Paul has to block, and this is the only block that allows him to trade with one copy of Scavenging Ooze, so here we are.
Yeah, there's so much to take into account here with Nam, too, about how he wants to use his mana for Scavenging Ooze. He's going to start by removing a Wooded Foothills. And he might be okay with saying, okay, we'll stop here, deal you 3. Maybe he wants to use Fulminator Mage right now. Maybe he doesn't.
I think it's better for Namsung to chump block here with Fulminator and then use it, if that's the sort of thing he wants to do.
It's also scary, too, because if you leave Paul with 3 lands, if he peels the 4th land, he gets the opportunity to play Collected Company.
Yep.
So you're incentivized a little bit to want to cut his resources. Now there's a Scavenging Ooze on the stack, and Namsung might say, I need to respond to this and remove the creature that's in the graveyard. That's what he's going to do. Take care of the Reliquary, gain a life, go up to 7. So we've got 7 to 4.
But this is really nice here as Paul now gets to attack with both if he wants it. Namsung can only chump block one of the 2 creatures. And then Paul is able to remove the Scavenging Ooze in Nam's graveyard if he wants to. That gets Paul up to 5.
But then there will be other creatures in the graveyard. So, there'll be other creatures in the graveyard for Nam. If he draws a removal spell, he can say, kill yours, kill you.
Exactly.
So how many creatures is Paul even supposed to attack with? He can present lethal this turn. But is presenting lethal correct, or is he just supposed to say, you know what, I'm going to hang back on defense, maybe try to play a little bit of a longer game, have this weird ooze battle with you? How aggressive is he supposed to get in this situation? He's even got Collected Company in his hand, so he might be incentivized to say, I'm okay playing a few more turns here, if you'd like to. But when you're playing against Jund, you mostly don't want to play more turns. This is very, very hard. Here's Noble Hierarch. So he's coming in. This is presenting lethal right now. Tarmogoyf for 3-4. Wild Mikado, of course, a 3-3. Fulminator Mage has no way to stop it from becoming a 3-3. There will always be a Plains and a Mountain on the battlefield. Weird situations like this in creature combat, my favorite part of Magic.
Yeah, especially in the big formats.
Yeah.
Because the boards get kind of weird and complicated. There's a lot more onboard tricks than you're going to see in a lot of standard formats. And it's rare that we get to see it because so many of the games are, I'm just casting spells, doing powerful things, I'm killing all of your stuff, you're killing all my stuff.
You expect this in a game of Limited. You do not expect it in a game of Constructed. And the unique thing here for Nam is he might just say, I'll go to 1.
Right.
Players, judges are moving toward the boards with your pairings. Please let them through.
The question I have is how much respect does Paul have for the possibility of a removal spell in Namsung's hand? The attack that he's making here and playing the Noble Hierarch as well seems to indicate to me that he is worried about it and he's trying to protect himself from that. Make Namsung have 2 removal spells, which is really hard to do. That said, Namsung's last turn was so anemic. The Fulminator Mage is not that impactful
Compared to what it could have been.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You feel like if it was Abrupt Decay or Maelstrom Pulse or Go for the Throat or whatever, you would have seen that kind of card. And with Namsung missing red mana, I think it's very easy to tell yourself a story that it's a red card. That's what's left over in his hand.
Especially. Well, it's yes and no as far as the red mana is concerned. By the way, the block here is a block on Tarmogoyf, and now before damage resolves, Nam is going to sacrifice the Fulminator Mage to take care of the Stomping Ground. 3 damage is going to come through. It's 4-4. It's weird because I agree with you on the surface about it's a red card. He's stuck on red mana, but at the same time, he had a Wooded Foothills 2 turns ago where he could have gotten the red mana but chose the green mana, which I think is correct, given the Scavenging Ooze that's in play.
But the question is, could he have afforded the 2 life at the time to get a Stomping Ground? Because that would have been another, there's so many variables right now that I don't think Paul could tell you for certain what's in his hand, but he's got some reasonable guesses.
Raging Ravine is the land that's been played. Scavenging Ooze is going to grow. He's going to eat some creatures out of the graveyard. Want to do this now so you don't have to have this weird game of chicken against Paul when he's got green mana available. Tarmogoyf is going to tick down a little bit here as Paul's enjoying his time with the die here.
There we go.
He has found a 2-3. But now Nam has to only play defense. He cannot get aggressive. But he's got the biggest creature on the table, which means that Paul may not have any very good attacks here.
But with Collecting Company in hand, he may not need to have a very good attack.
Yep.
Play a land and say go, and try to go wide next turn.
Might be fine just playing a longer game. And we're talking about Collecting Company as though it's a guarantee it's going to hit. There's no guarantees here. It is very likely to hit. There's a land.
Super Sunday Series
Wooded
players,
Foothills
do not
will
already
put
know, so
Paul
please make your way to your
potentially down to 3.
Yep.
I think you know a spell that deals 3 points of damage, and Nam has finally just found red mana. So now Paul has to be concerned with that. There are no creatures in the graveyard currently to remove to Scavenging Ooze, so there are so many different things that he has to run through his head, and he's just going to pass the turn back.
But the thing is, what's your plan against Lightning Bolt anyway? Because
It's unclear.
are you not casting Collecting Company, and now you're going to make an Alpha Strike where you lose one of your creatures and the use grows? I don't know if Lightning Bolt's a beatable card at this stage.
Depends how Paul feels about
Super
things.
Sunday Series players, welcome to round 3.
Liliana the Veil, I believe, the draw.
Not great right now, Paul, with some expendable creatures. Doesn't really need the Noble Hierarch once he casts the Collecting Company.
We do have to keep in mind, however, as Liliana will be placed onto the battlefield and tick down, causing Rietzl to sacrifice a creature, that this will be a creature that goes in the graveyard for Scavenging Ooze. So we can't forget about that. Paul is going to very quickly go down to 3, so he's decided, you know, if you have Lightning Bolt, good beats all around.
Right. It's so dangerous too, because it's easy to tell yourself the story of he had one card in his hand, it was Lightning Bolt, and then he drew Raging Ravine last turn. So if I'm in Paul's seat, it feels likely, but I don't know what the plan is against Lightning Bolt here anyway.
Yep.
So I think Paul just has to cast his Collecting Company and try to give himself enough resources to beat Liliana and go around the Scavenging Ooze.
You take that moment to kind of assess things as a player to say, you know what, he did just play red mana. If he has Lightning Bolt, it's unclear if I can beat Lightning Bolt anyway. As you assess the game, you might come to the decision of, I can't beat Lightning Bolt.
Yep.
So if you have it, fair enough. That does not appear to be the case. Now here's Collected Company. Sung going to rub his hands together, maybe hope for a miss. Again, given the construction of Paul's deck, it's rather unlikely. It looks like he only hit 1. So again, there's no guarantee you hit 2 with that card.
No.
Scavenging Ooze is what he's found. Now again, Paul will have to sacrifice a creature here. And it looks like Noble Hierarch is going to bite the dust. And now Scavenging Ooze is going to eat that. Gain a life. Go up to 7. Pass the turn back. Now one thing Paul can do here is he can get Wook down to 1, it appears. And actually, because there's an instant in the graveyard, Tarmogoyf scales up to a 3/4. So if Paul would like, he can attack for lethal.
Well, the problem is that Namsung can just eat the instant out of the graveyard. Then you have a 2/3. He goes ahead and blocks Wild Nacatl and falls to 1.
And then attacks back for lethal.
Yes. But if you assume that the last card in Namsung's hand is nothing, you can just cast the Nacatl and the Lavamancer, say go, and then hope next turn you can have them all run across the finish line.
Sure. Well, he's coming in with everybody.
This is the other way to do it. He still gets 2 chump blockers on the way back, which is the important thing.
There's a block. Scavenging Ooze activation can't eat that instant in the graveyard. So Collected Company is going to bite the dust. He'll eat a sorcery as well. And it looks like there's only 1 sorcery. Wow, so this might scale down to a 1/2.
Yep.
Yeah. So now 5 damage comes across. Boy, Scavenging Ooze good right now. Nakatl's going to get eaten. 5 damage will come across. Paul's going to take the opportunity to eat that Wild Nacatl. Tarmogoyf's going to stay as a 1/2. There are the other 2 creatures. Pass the turn back. He's trying to drag him across the finish line. And oddly enough, Paul went up to 4, no longer 3. Lightning Bolt's no good. Nam might be activating Ghost Quarter himself in the upkeep to thin his deck out a card. Yeah. And he, of course, has to take a look at the top card. People wondering at home why we watch Namsung Wook back-to-back rounds. He can play some Magic, my friend.
The problem right now is there's no mountain in the deck, and so he can't. Oh, excuse me, there is a mountain in the deck. Excuse me, that we had our minor error here. We do have a mountain in the deck, which means Anger of the Gods is still a live draw. I was about to say.
Oh my goodness!
And that's game. If he has Anger of the Gods, that's game.
Okay. And he has one in his sideboard.
Yeah. It's in here somewhere.
It's conceivable that it's in the deck.
Oh, I think it is for sure.
Yeah.
That was the one card during sideboard that the only one I thought for sure would be coming in. So Namsung still has a draw.
Boy, oh boy.
But I don't think anything else is going to do it.
I think
it's
so.
got to be Anger of the Gods right here.
From Catacombs, that is going to do it. Paul Rietzl's going to win this match over Namsung Wook. 2-0. Nia Company. Moving on. It's 10-2 here in the hands of the Hall of Famer.
And there's not really one moment that you can point to there to say, okay, where did Namsung lose that game? There's not one turn, there's not one card that Paul played.